Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel and to my last video of 2020. Today we're going to be making a tomato fish stew, so stay tuned if you want to find out how I go about making this. In my bowl we have 2 pieces of red sea bream which I've sliced and washed accordingly in a lot of lemon and vinegar to get rid of that fishy smell. And now we're just going to go ahead and season it with some Old Bay seasoning, and also going in with garlic granules, powdered ginger, some black pepper, also adding a little bit of everyday seasoning or all-purpose seasoning in this case, and I'm going to be following this up with some everyday seasoning as well. But it's entirely up to you what you use for this. You know, everyone has their preferences, especially where fish is concerned. And I'm just tossing it all up to make sure that the spices are incorporated, and we're going to let this rest just a tiny bit in time for the fish to fry. Now we're going to blend our aromatics for the stew. So I have a whole onion here which I sliced into pieces just to facilitate the blending process. And in a separate bowl we have further aromatics. So we have some ginger, and I think this is the equivalent of about 2 thumb sizes of ginger, garlic and anise seeds, which I'm also going to add into the bowl. And this is all going to be blended up with a little bit of water. Next, we are going to blend up some red bell peppers and tomatoes, which are going to form the basis of the stew. So I put in about 2 red bell peppers, which have been sliced, and 1 tin of chopped tomatoes. If you prefer, you can also use fresh tomatoes, and just blending this all up. Okay, time to fry our fish now, and I just went in with a good amount of oil. We're not pan frying this, we're going to fry this properly. And I just went in with a tablespoon of plain flour, and this is going to give the fish a nice coating. So once the oil is nice and hot, you want to insert your fish in very, very carefully. Fish can be quite fragile when you fry it, so I tend to not overcrowd the pan, so I just went in with 4 pieces. And I'm adding in a bit of onion just to flavor the oil. You don't want to skip this step, it actually makes such a difference. And also added a couple of sprigs of thyme, again for flavoring purposes. And we're going to let this fry on each side until they're both golden brown. This was actually my first time using red sea bream to make a fish stew. I tend to go for red snapper because I just really like this fish and everyone else likes it in the household. But I really don't regret it. It was really lovely. I love sea bream. It has a really nice bite to it. It's quite firm to the bite. It's not too fishy for a fish, if that makes sense. It doesn't smell too strong, in my experience anyway. So I quite enjoyed it, and I will definitely use it again. And if you like what you're seeing so far, please hit the like button. It really helps me understand what you like to see as well, so that I can know what to post. And if you're new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button, join the family. What are you waiting for? I post every week, and I would really like to have you in the family. And thank you very much for the support. So here we have it, our fish is nice and golden brown, and we can now just set it aside for later. Now we're just going to add some oil into a separate pot, and I went in with about maybe half a cup of oil and a whole onion which I sliced, and we're just going to let this sweat for a few minutes before I show you what we do next. Once the onions are translucent, we can add a few tablespoons of our aromatics. And I didn't actually use all of them because I realized that there was quite a lot of it. So I literally probably used half and put the remaining half into the freezer to use on a different recipe. So once the aromatics are added, we just stir and let this cook. And as you can see, it's been about 10 minutes at this point and it's absorbed all of the oil. And this is now ready to receive the blended tomato and pepper mix. We're going to rinse the container and follow this up with a bit of water to make sure that we don't waste anything. Give it a little stir to make sure that the aromatics are nicely incorporated into the tomatoes. At this point, you also now want to use the oil that we used to fry the fish and add a few ladlefuls of it into the tomato. This is just going to help it cook a lot faster. So we could let it steam, but it will take ages to cook. So I think it's just easier to add the oil right there and then, cover it up and let it cook for about 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, the stew is well on its way to being cooked, and I did check back a couple of times just to make sure that the bottom is not burning. But as you can see, the oil is risen to the top and the tomatoes look almost done. So at this point, I went ahead and added some tomato puree. This is about a tablespoon full of tomato puree that I'm just adding in, and we're going to stir this into the stew. Next, it's time to season the stew. So I went in with a sprig of rosemary, which I love using for fish, a bit of all-purpose seasoning, some black pepper. Also went in with a little bit of parsley, and finally a little bit of all-purpose seasoning. And that's all that was required in my case, but again, it's entirely up to you what you'd like to choose to season your stew. If you're happy with the seasoning, which in my case I thought it was perfect, it didn't need any further adjusting, you can cover this up just to let it cook for about 5 minutes, just to make sure that all of the seasonings are incorporated. And once 5 minutes have passed, we can now go ahead and add the fish. It's a good time, so proceed very carefully. Fried fish can be quite fragile and we don't want it to break in the stew, so I'm very gently lifting the fish onto the stew, and once I've done this, I'm going to turn this around just to make sure that it's nicely incorporated with sauce around it. And I should also mention, this is all happening on medium heat, so make sure it remains that way. I didn't add any extra water in this stew. I intended for this to be quite thick, but the problem with that sometimes is it can burn quite easily at the bottom, so just make sure that your heat remains medium to low, and just check on it regularly to make sure that the bottom is not burning. So for extra flavor, I went ahead and added a couple of Scotch bonnet peppers. I didn't pop them because I didn't want the stew to be too spicy. Now coming back, and I let this cook just a couple of minutes to ensure that the Scotch bonnet peppers are nice and soft. And I went in, with a classic African touch of adding some eggs. I love eggs in stew. I don't know, it just works somehow. But yeah, pretty much your stew is done. It came out absolutely fantastically, and if I say so myself, and the kitchen smelled amazing. I wish you could be there to smell the kitchen. It was absolutely delicious. I'm just plating it up, and we just had it with some rice, but this is very versatile. You can have this with all sorts of sides. You can have this with potato, we can have this with fufu, yam, banku, anything you like really. And yeah, here we go. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. I hope you replicate the recipe, and let me also take the opportunity to wish each and every one of you a happy, healthy new year 2021. And I'm so grateful for all of the support. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.